Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Night had fallen on Chicago, and a chilly wind bit the deserted streets. Marcus Bennett, a black man in his 30s, walked briskly home after a long day at work. His coat wasn't thick enough to protect him completely, but he held his head high, trying to focus on the comfort of his warm apartment. Suddenly, 2 police cars stopped abruptly in front of him. Their flashing lights illuminated his face, and before he could even react, the officers were at his side. "Hey, you! Stop," one of them shouted. Marcus, surprised, obeyed, raising his hands. They pushed him against a frozen wall, laughing cruelly. "What are you doing here at this hour, kid?" the other policeman asked with a mocking smile. The hurrying passers-by looked away, some too scared to intervene. Marcus felt his heart pound, not out of fear for himself, but out of frustration at this gratuitous injustice. They searched him for no reason, treating him like a criminal. Every word they spoke was another blow to his dignity. The cold bit at his skin, but the real pain came from the public humiliation, the shame imposed by men who were supposed to protect society. As they walked away, laughing at their own authority, Marcus stood there, frozen, his breath short, his hands numb. In that icy night, a flame of determination began to burn within him. He knew that one day, he would no longer be a victim. In the days following the incident, Marcus couldn't shake the image of the police officers pushing him against the frozen wall. Every detail of that humiliation played over and over in his head, the cold, the cruel laughter, the indifferent stares of passers-by. But instead of letting himself be overwhelmed by anger, he decided to channel his pain into energy. He spent his evenings thinking. How could a mere man protect himself against arbitrary action? How could he respond intelligently without putting himself in danger? The answers weren't simple, but Marcus knew he had to act with strategy, not impulse. He began by strengthening his body and mind. Cold morning runs, self-defense exercises, and reading about law and civil rights became his daily ritual. Marcus wanted to understand not only how to defend himself physically, but also how to use the legal system to achieve justice. At the same time, he connected with local civil rights groups. He attended conferences and met with lawyers and activists who shared his desire for change. These encounters were a revelation: he was not alone. Others had experienced similar humiliations and had found ways to fight back intelligently. At night, he reread the notes he had taken, pondering possible strategies. He imagined a day when he could return, no longer as a victim, but as someone capable of turning the situation to his advantage. This thought filled him with new energy. Marcus understood that he had to wait, prepare, and strike at the opportune moment. Thus, from the icy humiliation of that night was born a silent but unwavering determination. Marcus Bennett was no longer just a man marked by injustice, he was becoming a man ready to change the course of things. Marcus knew he couldn't just rely on anger and abstract plans. To complete his revenge, he needed to strengthen himself, surround himself with the right people, and acquire skills he didn't already have. A few weeks after the incident, he temporarily left Chicago to move to a nearby city known for its leadership and strategy programs. There, he received intensive training in law, communications, and personal security. He met mentors who helped him understand how justice could be used as a powerful tool. Experienced lawyers taught him the intricacies of legal procedures, and activists showed him how to raise public awareness and gain media attention. Marcus also expanded his network. He met with honest former police officers, journalists, and even influential business figures who had experienced injustice and learned to fight back intelligently. Each of these interactions added a new layer to his future strategy. At the same time, he strengthened his body and mind. Daily physical training, meditation, and reading biographies of inspiring leaders transformed his pain into discipline. Marcus understood that to be respected, he had to appear invincible, even in the face of the arrogance of others. But the most important lesson he learned was patience. Impulsive revenge often leads to personal destruction. Marcus had to wait for the right moment, analyze every detail, and strike with precision, leaving no room for chance. As the months passed, the flame of his determination grew into a controlled and methodical fire. He was not only preparing to return, he was preparing to be a symbol, one of dignity, resilience, and justice in the face of humiliation. 6 months after the incident that had shaped his life, Marcus Bennett returned to Chicago. The city hadn't changed, but he had. He walked the familiar streets with a newfound confidence, his gaze clear and steady. The same icy sidewalks, the same flickering streetlights, everything seemed to watch him like a silent witness to his past. Now Marcus was no longer the frightened and humiliated man. He was surrounded by allies, mentors, and professionals ready to help him expose the injustice he had suffered. Every move was calculated, every interaction carefully weighed. He knew that rushing could ruin months of preparation. He revisited the neighborhood where it all began. The shops, the streetlights, the icy wall he'd been pushed against, every detail strengthened his resolve. He took the time to speak to a few residents he knew, subtly building a network of potential witnesses and allies for what was to come. But Marcus hadn't returned for impulsive revenge. He wanted a lasting impact, a public demonstration that injustice had a price. His strategy combined evidence, media, and legality. Every element had to be perfect so that the whole world would see what had happened and understand that no one should go unpunished. As he walked through the icy wind, he felt that old anger transform into a methodical energy, ready to be used. Marcus Bennett was no longer a victim. He was a man prepared, patient, and about to change the narrative of his life, and show his former oppressors that humiliation came at a price they hadn't anticipated. Marcus knew that patience and preparation would be his best weapons. He began by meticulously gathering evidence and testimonies that could support his future actions. He revisited every location linked to his humiliation, taking photographs, noting details, and speaking discreetly with witnesses who had witnessed the incident. He also contacted local journalists known for their integrity and fairness. With them, he shared his story cautiously, never fully revealing his plans, but generating enough interest that the media would be ready to support him when the time came. Meanwhile, Marcus assembled a legal team. Civil rights lawyers, police procedure experts, and even former law enforcement officers became his allies. Together, they analyzed every legal angle, anticipating every possible reaction from the police and the police. Marcus left nothing to chance. He simulated several scenarios, planning every detail. What would an arrogant police officer do in a public confrontation? How would witnesses react? Which camera angles would best capture the injustice? Every aspect of his strategy was designed to transform his revenge into a clear and irrefutable message. At the same time, he continued to reinforce his image, impeccable attire, confident delivery, and perfect control of his emotions. He knew that public perception would be as crucial as the evidence itself. Marcus wanted to be seen by the police as the calm, intelligent, and untouchable man they had never imagined. Every day, he rehearsed his actions, refined his strategies, and expanded his network of support. The transformation was complete. Marcus was no longer a wounded citizen. He was a strategist, a man ready to publicly expose those who had thought they could humiliate him with impunity. Winter had returned to Chicago, and the biting cold reminded Marcus of the night it all began. But this time, he wasn't alone or vulnerable. Surrounded by his allies and equipped with cameras, witnesses, and reporters, he walked through the neighborhood where he had been humiliated. Every step was calculated, every glance measured. He chose an evening when traffic was light, but passers-by could witness what was about to happen. The media were in position, ready to discreetly film. Witnesses had been notified and were ready to intervene if necessary. Marcus had transformed the entire city into a strategic theater. When the police officers recognized him on a street corner, their usual arrogance immediately reappeared. "Hey, you," one of them shouted, thinking he saw the same vulnerable man they had manhandled a few months earlier. But Marcus showed neither fear nor nervousness. He stood straight, calm, his gaze fixed. Instead of running away or getting angry, Marcus spoke calmly, "Remember me? You humiliated me right here, in this very icy wind." The police officers, surprised by his calm and poise, stammered out clumsy apologies, unaware that every move and word was being captured on camera. The scene was unfolding exactly as Marcus had planned. Witnesses were attentive, journalists were taking notes and filming every reaction. The police officers, taken aback, were beginning to lose their cool, while Marcus maintained complete control of the situation. That evening, for the first time in months, Marcus felt a powerful sense of control. He was no longer a victim. He had transformed his pain and humiliation into a public display of courage and strategy. And that was just the beginning. His plan, now in motion, would soon reach its climax. The day after the confrontation on the icy streets, images of Marcus and the humiliated police officers were already circulating on social media. The videos clearly showed the police officers' arrogance in the face of a calm and determined man. Comments poured in: outrage, support, admiration. Marcus had become a symbol of unwavering dignity in the face of injustice. Local and national media picked up the story. Reporters came to interview Marcus, fascinated by his strategy, his self-control, and his meticulously executed plan. He explained, without hatred or anger, how he had transformed his pain into thoughtful and legal action. Every word reinforced the impact of his message: no one should go unpunished. Meanwhile, the officers involved found themselves under fire. Their reputations began to crumble as visual evidence and witness accounts mounted. Some colleagues expressed their discomfort publicly, while others remained silent, knowing their position was becoming delicate. Marcus, however, remained calm. He knew his strength lay not just in media exposure, but in how he would translate that attention into tangible justice. His legal allies were already analyzing the reactions, noting inconsistencies in the police officers' accounts, and preparing the case for the next stage. That day, Marcus felt the tide turn. What had begun as a cold humiliation was becoming a movement, an example to all victims of injustice. Every share, every article, every comment fueled his determination. He now knew that public opinion, combined with a solid legal strategy, could create real change. Marcus had lit the first spark of a fire of justice, and no one could extinguish it. A few weeks after the footage went viral, Marcus, supported by his legal team, filed a formal complaint against the police officers responsible for his humiliation. The case was solid: videos, witness statements, expert reports, and legal analyses unequivocally demonstrated the officers' misconduct. The case quickly moved to a Chicago court. The previously arrogant police officers found themselves facing a wall of evidence and media attention. Their lawyers tried to downplay the incident, citing routine procedures, but the clarity of the footage and the consistency of the testimony made any defense nearly impossible. Marcus entered the courtroom calmly and confidently. He stood tall, dressed in an impeccable suit, his expression serene. Every glance from the judge and the audience underlined his composure and restored dignity. The police officers, on the other hand, seemed overwhelmed by the magnitude of the situation. The hearings were intense. Testimonies from bystanders, surveillance camera footage, and expert analysis demonstrated the brutality and arrogance of the police. Marcus, for his part, remained a paragon of patience and control, allowing no negative emotions to influence his presentation. The verdict, eagerly awaited and with great media attention, was finally delivered. The officers were suspended and charged with abuse of power and discriminatory behavior. Marcus's victory was not only personal, it represented a step forward for all victims of similar violence and injustice. This success strengthened his resolve. Marcus knew his fight was not over, but he had proven that perseverance, strategy, and dignity could triumph over arrogance and injustice. What had begun as a humiliation in the cold had now transformed into a symbol of justice and resilience. The day of the trial left a taste of victory in the air, but for Marcus, there was more at stake than just punishment for the police officers. He wanted this story to become a living example for his community and for all victims of injustice. At an event organized by a local civil rights group, Marcus spoke to an attentive crowd. His voice was calm, but each word carried the weight of his experience. We cannot remain silent in the face of injustice. We have the right and the duty to defend ourselves, but with intelligence and dignity. The faces in the audience reflected emotion and admiration. Marcus explained how he transformed his pain into a strategic plan, how he used the law, the media, and community support to create real change. His story became a symbol of resilience and quiet power. Meanwhile, the police officers, scarred by their public humiliation, were beginning to feel the social and professional consequences of their actions. The media continued to follow their situation, and their image was irreparably tarnished. Marcus, watching from afar, knew that his revenge lay not in physical or emotional vengeance, but in the way he had reversed the roles. From victim, he had become an example of justice and respect. The local community began to mobilize more to denounce the abuse, inspired by Marcus's story. Workshops, awareness campaigns, and support groups sprang up. His action had sparked a larger movement, and Marcus understood that his personal battle was now having a collective impact. On this symbolic day, Marcus smiled inwardly. It wasn't just a legal victory, it was proof that patience, strategy, and dignity could triumph over arrogance and oppression. And above all, it sent a clear message: no one should ever underestimate the power of a determined and fair person. The trial had concluded, but the repercussions were felt far beyond the courtroom. The officers responsible for Marcus's humiliation were convicted, permanently suspended, and faced financial and disciplinary penalties. The court acknowledged the seriousness of their actions and commended Marcus's meticulous strategy. The press echoed this victory, and Marcus became a national symbol of resilience and justice. His name circulated on social media, in newspapers, and on television. But instead of getting carried away by the glory, Marcus remained humble. For him, this victory wasn't personal, it represented the struggle of all those who had been victims of similar injustices. His family, friends, and mentors celebrated with him, but Marcus already had his sights set on the future. He wanted this victory to inspire and protect others. He used the funds raised from the officers' convictions to create a legal aid program for victims of police abuse and to organize civil rights training sessions. On the streets of Chicago, passers-by who knew his story greeted him with respect. His return to the neighborhood where he had been humiliated was now a stroll of dignity and inspiration. The same icy sidewalks that had witnessed his fear now bore witness to his newfound strength. This triumph demonstrated that with patience, strategy, and courage, even the most humiliating situation could be transformed into a resounding victory. Marcus had succeeded in turning injustice into a powerful message: it is possible to stand up, fight back, and inspire real and lasting change. Months after the trial and the media coverage of his story, Marcus Bennett continued to work for his community. He founded an organization dedicated to supporting victims of police injustice, offering legal advice, emotional support, and training on civil rights advocacy. His initiative attracted the attention of national media and international organizations. Marcus became a mentor to many young people in Chicago, showing them how to transform anger and humiliation into strength and purposeful action. He often told them, true power lies not in violence or revenge, but in strategy, patience, and dignity. The neighborhood where he had been humiliated also changed. Residents, inspired by his courage, began to mobilize more against abuse and support those who were victims of injustice. Local police officers, aware that the community was watching, became more cautious and responsible in their actions. Marcus, now respected and recognized, sometimes walked these streets, thoughtful. What had begun as a cold night of humiliation had transformed into a movement for justice and inspiration. His story proved that even in the face of the most brutal injustice, it was possible to regain control, transform pain into strength, and leave a lasting legacy. And in Marcus's heart there was now an unshakable conviction: every humiliation could become an opportunity to rise up stronger, fight smarter, and change the world, one step at a time.